Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Levin podcast. As always, I am Kristen Blazek, and I work in the college. I'm the coordinator of student recruitment. And with me also, as always, is Molly. Hello, Molly.
Hello.
Are you
I'm
getting
Molly
ready?
Schnoke. Yeah, I am. I joined Kristen here on the podcast. I'm with the Center for Economic Development and Community Planning and Development.
Are you ready for the end of the year? So we're taping this. This is the end of the year of 2021. Are you ready for it to be over?
I think we've had a fun year of podcasts.
I think so too.
I'm ready for 2022 and the slate of podcasts that we have scheduled for next year. So that's exciting.
Yeah, me too. I'm ready for this. We're only like mid-season right now, so I'm really excited for what we've got upcoming. But with us today, which I'm really excited about, is we have two lovely people with us. We have Iryna with us and Anna. So Iryna, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Iryna Demko. I am research associate at the Center for Economic Development at Cleveland State University.
And then with us is also Anna.
Hi, I'm Claudia Sant'Anna. I am assistant professor at West Virginia University for agribusiness and agrifinance.
So you're with us from other than Ohio. So we taped this in Ohio. So we've reached international and now we're reaching across states.
That's really good.
We're broadening our inclusivity.
That's right. So could one of you explain to us exactly what we're going to be talking about today? Just the overarching idea of this program, because it sounds really interesting.
So today we are going to be talking about the Paycheck Protection Program. This program has been one of the largest economic stimulus programs in the US history. And the program was introduced by the Small Business Administration when COVID started. The program included two rounds. One was in 2020, and that round covered 18 weeks. And in 2021, they came back to the program, and the program lasted 20 weeks in 2021.
And what exactly is it? Because it's the Paycheck Protection Program. What exactly are people getting when they do the stimulus?
Yeah, so small businesses could apply for it, and they can apply for an amount. Most of it is for the paycheck, so to pay their employees. But they can also request it for rent, other benefits that they pay their employees, mortgage interest, utilities. Those are the kind of things they can also request for. But the the bulk of what they're requesting should go towards their employees, towards the paychecks.
This program was a rapid response to the onset of the pandemic and its impact on small businesses across the country. What did your research look at?
So we looked at how characteristics of the business owners, so the impact of race, gender, and ethnicity on the amount that they were approved for. So we looked at that with two focuses. One was a quantitative side of things, where we controlled for things such as the lenders that they used, the size of the business, of course, the demographics, so race, gender, ethnicity. We also controlled for where the business was located. So if it was a rural or urban county, among other things. And so we're looking at whether the characteristic of the business owner was related to an amount that they received. So if it was basically equally distributed between the business owners.
And did you look at that nationally, or was there a smaller geographic focus that your study examined?
So the quantitative side, where we did an estimation, so we ran an econometric model that accounted for the full sample, so the whole, everyone that was approved in the program. But then, and I'll let Iryna talk a little bit more about that, we also interviewed 19 small business owners in Northeast Ohio.
Yes, so we focused our research, the qualitative part, on Northeast Ohio, and the reason why, because we really wanted to, first of all, the Center for Economic Development is located in Northeast Ohio. Northeast Ohio includes 18 counties in Ohio, and this area has shown lagging characteristics of economic well-being compared to the state of Ohio and the nation. When you look at the poverty rate, at the unemployment rates, they are higher in Northeast Ohio compared to other areas in the US. However, we are looking at specifically at the COVID pandemic, and we've shown that 40% of previously employed residents of Northeast Ohio, they filed for unemployment during 2020 when pandemic hit. So it was really important for us for this specific reason to look at Northeast Ohio because of this 40% unemployed, previously employed. And small businesses, they employ a lot of people. So these unemployed, they could have be employed but by a small business. So it's really important for us to look at small business and how US government helps small businesses during the pandemic. And as Molly mentioned at the very beginning, we are looking at the inclusivity of federal assistance, if it was equally distributed between minority-owned businesses and white-owned businesses, Hispanic-owned businesses and not Hispanic-owned businesses, female-owned businesses and male-owned businesses.
So we know that the pandemic itself has disproportionately affected minorities and people of color in this country, disease-wise. What did you find in terms of employment and support for small businesses along those lines?
Yeah, so we found that in terms of the program, so in terms of the PPP program, we did find that minority-owned businesses in general received less from the program than white-owned businesses. So for example, if we're thinking about a 5 to 19 employee business, we found out that they received about 19% on average less than white-owned businesses. We do want to pass on the information that this is not causal. So this doesn't mean that just because they were that type of business, they were doomed to receive less. So it just what we find in terms of correlation. But we also found that female-owned businesses received about 22% less if we're looking at businesses from 20 to 499 employees. So they received about 22% less than male-owned. And we find about 5%, when we're thinking about Hispanic-owned businesses, they received about 5% less on average than their white-owned counterpart.
In terms of the structural interviews, we found that, so first of all, for the interviews, we interviewed different types of businesses. We interviewed businesses that received large loans, like 2 million, and businesses that received small loans, 20,000. We also looked at, we also talked with female-owned businesses and male-owned businesses. We had representatives of minorities-owned businesses and white-owned businesses. So we have very diverse pool, and they also represented very different industries. And what we found that there was a very big difference in the experience of businesses that received large loans, more than 150,000, and businesses that received small loans. For businesses that received small loans, they had a difficulty with finding a lender, with finding a bank or other financial institutions that would want to work with them on the PPP application. They had to submit multiple applications to different banks, and they were more likely to go to a regional bank, and they were more likely to use a financial fintech or non-traditional lenders like online banks. Some of them went through PayPal, some of them went through Ready Capital or Lendio. Also, some respondents said that, so the PPP loan could include not only wage, but not only payroll, but also rent, mortgage interest, and utilities. But many respondents, doesn't matter size, they didn't realize that they could include these items. They thought that it's only for wages, but it's not true. So there was some misinformation. Although, like, we live in digital era, everyone has access to internet, but still they were not informed correctly on the PPP program. Also, large PPP loan recipients, they mentioned that they got approved their application faster. It took, for some of them, just took a few days or up to 3 weeks, but smaller recipients said that it took from 10 days to 6 weeks. And one more interesting fact about the PPP application, SBA estimated the time for completing application was 8 minutes, and large businesses, obviously, they had to collect a lot more information about the number of employees they have, about the payroll. So for them, it took up to 20-30 hours to submit the application. While for some small businesses, they said that indeed, it only took them about 10 minutes to submit.
So why do you think issues with lenders has been in discussion around number of community-related and community development issues? That includes, small loans for mortgages in housing. There's a lot of discussion around lenders making small loans, and it seems to be that is the case here. Even though this was a government-supported program, that there were many lenders who were not willing to make smaller loans and targeted larger businesses, larger loan sizes. Is that the case? Or, is it that it costs the bank the same amount of money to service a $20,000 loan for a small business as it does a $2 million loan?
Yeah, so I think behind from the bank's perspective, one of the things we did find was that if you had already a relation with the bank, sometimes they would even reach out to you to say this is an opportunity. And then also they did have benefits from participating in the program. So they did either through fees that they received. So I do believe there might be their own interests going on in the background in terms of the size of the loan that they would be working with. However, we don't know specifically. That would be something to investigate in the future. But they did receive, there are studies now looking at the fees side of commercial banks that they received. And especially one interesting thing is that the Paycheck Protection Program, in terms of agricultural banks, commercial banks that lend to agriculture, they actually didn't do as badly because they participated in the program. So you can kind of see the ones that didn't, and see that they didn't do as badly. This is what research I've been looking at, reading has found.
And I would like to add here about credit constraints usually faced by female-owned businesses and minority-owned businesses. In the case of female-owned businesses, they are more likely to, because they are more likely to be concentrated in less capital intensive industries, they are less likely to have a credit, to have established bank relationships. So they are in the category of underbanked. That's why they had difficulties. And for the case of minorities, it's also a very similar situation. Research has found that minority-owned businesses, they have higher loan denial rate, and it's even higher than in mortgage. And they also have, when they receive the loan, they usually have the lower amount. And earlier research on PPP loans found that businesses located in majority white neighborhoods, they received PPP loans faster than businesses located in majority Black or majority Latino or Hispanic communities. So it's also about the speed of approval.
So that's, I mean, that's incredibly interesting and yet incredibly distressing information, and that it so closely mirrors the experience that minority populations have with mortgage lending and their relationship in the banking world as it is. And so I wonder if you guys came away with some, kind of policy recommendations, not just for SBA future programs, but, this idea that banking relationships not only impact the access to loan size and speed with which a small business can find and access support, right, going forward. So this idea of building banking relationships in vulnerable and minority communities.
Yeah, so I mean, specific to what we looked at, we believe that if the intent of the program is to target minorities, that it can't be kind of a one size fits all. So it has to be targeted, and so when it's like transparency and when it's advertised, you want to make sure that the group that you're focusing on actually knows what's going on. And that's something that we do see a change from 2020 when the program was first launched to 2021, that there were some changes there on how the program was targeted, and people started to know more about it, became more transparent about how you can apply. They allowed for non-banks to also make these loans for applications to be made through non-banks. So that meant that areas that were underbanked, so with less banks, could also try to apply through these other types of lenders. And so we do see a slight change there in terms of this distribution of who received the loans or not. So that's one of the policy suggestions that we have. Iryna, do you want to comment?
Yeah, I would like to add about the need for technical assistance, especially for smaller business. And I want to emphasize it's a free technical assistance, because what we are seeing from the interviews that small businesses didn't know where to find help. They would, one business owner said that he would ask help from a banker. The banker said, go to your accountant. The accountant said, go to your banker. So it just, and you don't know where to go. And I know that, for example, Cleveland State has the Small Business Development Center, where they provided free technical assistance for small businesses with the application process. And now SBA's, the PPP program has closed. However, many businesses are applying for forgiveness now, and for some businesses, forgiveness goes smoothly, for some, no. So maybe now help with forgiveness would be important. What we heard from the interviews, that the need for a centralized application portal, of course, now it's not as important, but SBA introduced a single portal for forgiveness. So there is one place where you apply for forgiveness. That I think really helps with PPP. I also want to add that although like everything didn't go very smoothly, but I think SBA, the program helped to small businesses to establish some kind of relationship with SBA. Mm-hmm. And I think this is very important because I checked before our interview that in the US, we have about 30 million small businesses. And of this 30 million, almost 5 million applied for the PPP loan, almost 5 million businesses. So 15% of all businesses in the US, they had some experience with PPP program. And now they know how to work with SBA. And PPP, it's not the only one program offered by SBA to small businesses. There is also either loan. There are some special targeted programs for restaurants, for different types of businesses. I think this is how this was an important component of PPP.
So I have kind of two questions swirling around in
I was gonna say I want to reiterate what you were saying, Molly, really quickly. To go back to like the whole mortgage situation with minority business owners and just in general, what we've been seeing with banks and minorities. So you're talking about they don't know, like there was like this gap in knowledge to even apply for this PPP loan. But looking at the data, were you finding in what we're mirroring with the mortgage lending, where more the minority and female-owned business, the women-owned businesses, when they did apply, did they get accepted at the same rates? What kind of rates did they get for the PP loan? And are we seeing that kind of same thing going on with mortgages, where the amount of people that apply, only a fraction of them will get a loan, whereas more often you'll see white male owners getting more loans?
I'll take a stab at this first. So in this case, right, the interesting thing about this program is that it doesn't, I wouldn't necessarily say that the program discriminates. We came to the conclusion that why we see this disparity is more in terms of like how it was advertised, like Iryna said, access to help on how to fill it out, that people know about it. Maybe there's background issues going on, that the person maybe was rejected at a bank previously, and so they don't feel comfortable applying through the program. So we believe it's something more, it has to do more with whether or not they applied and not as much about them being rejected once they applied. Now, it's important to note that we do not know who applied, right? We know who was approved. So we have who was approved, and from those approved, you do notice there is a difference in what they received. It's also important to note that the information, while informing whether your gender and whether your race and ethnicity was voluntary. And so there is a number of people that just did not inform that at all. And so that information is then also, we control for it, but we do not know whether that person, that business owner, falls into one category or the other.
So to me, there's also this issue you were talking about. It's not the intent of the program, but maybe a consequence of a constellation of other long-standing challenges in minority communities around things like access to banking, right? And this is this idea of opportunity. And so access is access to information. It's access to people. It's access to the institutions or organizations that can assist them, right? It's all these access points along the way. And there are likely businesses for which the owner or person who was applying on behalf of the business knew where to go, knew who to turn to, knew what to ask, had those relationships, that networking, right? That access. Access isn't just this program exists, apply to it. And it's also sticks in my head because I hear, a lot about our minority communities here in Cleveland, where it's also this issue of, their own resources to engage in these programs. And if you're a small business owner, or a female business owner, or a minority business owner, and you have 3 employees or 5 employees, and you don't know how to navigate the bank or haven't had that experience before, that's going to take you a lot longer and take a lot of your time and effort as a resource to your business to go through the application process and to engage with the SBA that maybe they don't have time to do, right? They don't have the capacity within their business to go through all of this. And so that's a burden, kind of an unforeseen consequence of the program. And it strikes me that SBA, when you're talking about all the other programs they have, they really want to reach out to minority businesses. Part of it is going to be providing some of this access to the other services and other opportunities, right? All of the windows and avenues of access into these programs to really get people into them and make that successful. So it's not just, hey, we have it, and then, step back and wait and see what happens. So a question related to that, and a follow-up with businesses about, is that something you asked them? Did you not go for this, or were hesitant about just because of the time that it takes? Because you don't have, as a small business owner, maybe you're up at midnight on your computer applying. You don't have the time during the day, right? And then also, I wanted to ask a question about your follow-up to this. So you talked about the forgiveness portion of this program. And I think that that's really what could be the most helpful part of this program for minority and female-owned businesses, which is that it doesn't become a loan that they have to pay back. It becomes essentially a grant, right? It's forgivable for them. That could really help them out in this particular time. Are you going to go back and look at which businesses that went through the program were approved of for forgiveness, which weren't, and maybe doing a sample interview again of the experience of businesses in the forgiveness process?
We actually heard our interviews was about 20 minutes, but one interview lasted 50 minutes, and it was about the very bad negative experience with the forgiveness process. So I count that as we already talked about. It can be very challenging because of the change.
I think most people have most people will just continue to talk if they have a bad experience, though. So I think that's perfectly normal, is that when you have a bad experience, you're going to tell everybody, and you're going to do it in length. So I get it. The 50 minutes, I could get it. I could probably talk for 15 minutes about an experience with a banker as well.
What I found interesting that some businesses, it was their choice. They thought they didn't need to apply for PPP, and it was their choice. They just, no, we think this is not fair for us to apply. We don't need it. It's like it's their possession. And I found quite a few of them.
That's interesting that they didn't think that they either needed it or they didn't want to, take advantage of a program that they were eligible for. But right, that again to me speaks to this idea of understanding and access, right? Because there are some businesses, and potentially I don't know data, I have nothing to back this up with other than anecdotal sort of stories, but white male-owned businesses who will take advantage of and access any program that they're eligible for, or any support that you're eligible for, and why not? And there's maybe a different mentality in other communities of, I think, a success in doing it on your own, of not going for some of those programs, right? I think there are potentially cultural aspects as well as aspects of engaging with other federal programs and assistance that have come through minority communities that maybe don't have a history of going so well. that, are an impediment to, many people who would be eligible to actually engage with those programs or access those resources because they've had bad experiences in the past.
Also, when we speak about inclusion, it's not only one of the dimensions of economic inclusion that SBA defined, and we looked in our research, is rural versus urban areas. Mm-hmm. And we did find that rural areas, they received smaller PPP loans compared to urban areas. And part of it could be just that the cost of living in urban areas is higher, and salary, we looked at the PPP per employee. And when you look at PPP per employee, it's basically the wages. And so the wage in urban areas is higher. So that's why urban areas received higher PPP per employee. But part of it is also, I think, access to information, how much you could have applied for. And one of the research that we looked at is also access of agricultural businesses to this program. And it's very interesting that SBA used to be prohibited to provide financial assistance, to provide disaster assistance to agricultural businesses for 30 years. But when pandemic happened, they canceled the requirement, and at some point, only agricultural businesses could apply for some of the programs from SBA. And we look specifically at production agriculture. Production agriculture received about almost $17 billion in PPP loans. And the interesting thing that the average loan amount was smaller to agriculture compared to other industries.
So I kind of want to jump back to what Molly was saying of maybe, so I know you guys are looking at like the acceptance and, for applications, but with this lack of communication is how they communicate, but also more on a gendered and cultural basis of how the information is being put out. So not just, hey, it's here, if you can find it, you have access and stuff like that, but specifically how it's put out to where it's maybe not apparent that it's, or it looks like what Molly was saying is when you've had a bad experience with, not getting loans and have, always being turned down, or the loans that you get being outrageous and not helpful, what the hesitance would be in applying for a PPP loan. So looking at a study, maybe looking at how the people who didn't apply and why they didn't apply, and going from there to maybe correct some of this knowledge gap.
I guess that goes to, what are your plans for future research?
Yeah. What are we looking at? Because I honestly think that would be really interesting is who didn't apply and why didn't they apply? And it's not just that they didn't know, but why didn't they know?
Yeah, that would be definitely very interesting. It would require probably another year or two, probably two, in order to find these and find a representative sample. Right now, our plans, we want to look at the role of these non-banks in the program. There's much interest in understanding the role of non-traditional lenders. And then we also plan on looking a little bit more inside the agriculture, the production ag industry, and trying to understand there how PPP was distributed. The data set is very rich, and there's a lot of questions that can be answered. And I think definitely the suggestion about looking closer at the forgiveness is also an interesting thing that we can look at as we move on. And maybe we can apply a survey that would look at why certain people did not apply specifically. I don't know if Iryna had some comments on why some people mentioned they did not apply.
I think with this, I just want to acknowledge the work of, I want to say that this work was supported by the U.S. Economic Development Administration University Center Award, and it was also supported by the Levin College Levin Women Fund. And without their help, without their grants, we couldn't do it. So thank you, our funders.
Well, that's a beautiful conclusion to. We're right on time, so I want to thank you guys. Anna, do you have any last words about this project?
No, I think Molly put it very nicely in terms of the background issues that we were thinking that were going on into why we're seeing these changes of the differences, right, in the amounts received by business owners, of minority business owners or female business owners.
Well, I thank you both for joining us today. It's a really interesting program to look into, and every community across the United States has small businesses, so that this research can inform what's happening in communities across the country and understanding how to support small businesses through the pandemic. I'm really interested to see how they come out of it and what the impact this program had.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, and thank you, Molly, for being here again. And that's it. That concludes this episode of the podcast. Stay tuned for more podcasts coming up. And also make sure to like, subscribe, share, do the whole thing so that this podcast can continue to reach more and more people, so we have more knowledge out there about the Paycheck Protection Program. So thank you again. And everyone have a great rest of your year, depending if it's 21 or 22, it doesn't matter. Just have a good year.